I used to think I knew everything about my best friend. Caleb and I had been inseparable since high school. Late night calls, weekend hangouts, dumb inside jokes that made no sense to anyone but us. So when he invited me to spend the summer at his dad's house in the mountains, I didn't even think twice. "You'll love it up there," he'd said. "Just trees, fresh air, and no responsibilities for 2 whole weeks." Sounded perfect. The only thing that gave me pause was his dad. I'd never met him. Caleb didn't talk about him much, just said he'd moved to a cabin in Colorado after the divorce. "He's chill," was all I got when I asked. So, yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect. We drove up the winding mountain roads in Caleb's old Civic, music blasting, both of us high on junk food and caffeine. It was early June, warm but not unbearable, and the deeper into the forest we went, the more I could feel the stress bleeding out of my body. Then we pulled into the driveway. The cabin was a lot more modern than I expected. Not some creaky old shack, but a sleek wooden home with huge windows and a wraparound porch. The kind of place people posted on Instagram with captions like, "off-grid healing vibes." As we stepped out, the front door opened, and there he was, Caleb's dad. "Hey boys," he called, walking out to greet us. I tried not to stare. I don't know what I was expecting. Some flannel-wearing, bearded mountain man? But this guy? He looked like he'd just stepped off the set of a Netflix drama. Mid-40s, maybe, but with that kind of rugged, effortless good looks that made you feel awkward about your own face. Fitted tee, worn jeans, tanned arms, and short salt and pepper hair that somehow made him look even hotter. "This is my dad, Peter," Caleb said, tossing me a glance. I stuck out my hand. "Nice to meet you, sir." He smiled, gripping my hand a little too firmly. "Call me Peter. Sir makes me feel old." His voice was deep, calm, the kind that made you want to listen, even if he was just talking about the weather. We carried our bags in, and the place looked even better on the inside. Wood everywhere, but polished and clean, with big leather couches, a fireplace, and those huge windows letting in golden afternoon light. It smelled like cedar and something faintly musky, like expensive soap. "You boys can take the upstairs loft," Peter said, gesturing to a wooden staircase. "Just keep it down if you're going to be up playing games all night." Yeah, Caleb mumbled, already hauling his backpack upstairs. I lingered a second longer. Peter caught me looking around and smiled. "It's a lot, huh?" I nodded. "It's beautiful. I thought it'd be more rustic." He laughed. "I like hot showers too much for that." That night, we ate grilled steaks on the back deck and watched the sunset bleed across the treetops. Caleb was already half asleep by the time we came inside, yawning dramatically before disappearing into the loft. I wasn't tired yet. Maybe it was the altitude, or the way the stars looked clearer out here, like you could just reach up and grab one. I wandered into the living room and found Peter there, sitting on the couch with a book in one hand and a whiskey in the other. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, looking up. "Just not used to quiet like this." He nodded. "Yeah, takes getting used to." There was a pause. "You want a drink?" he asked. I hesitated. "I'm 20, he smirked. "And?" "Sure." He poured me 2 fingers of whiskey and handed it over. I sat across from him, cradling the glass in both hands like it might spill. The burn was immediate, but not terrible. "You in college?" he asked. "Junior next fall. Psychology." "Huh, good field." "You always live out here?" I asked, more to make conversation than anything else. "Nah," he said, leaning back. "Moved here after the divorce. Needed the space." I nodded. "Caleb doesn't talk about it much." Peter gave a small shrug. "Neither do I." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just present, like we were both thinking things we weren't saying. Eventually, I stood. "Thanks for the drink." He looked up at me again, his eyes sharp and unreadable. "Anytime." I went upstairs, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the twin bed next to Caleb's, staring at the slanted wooden ceiling, listening to the creak of the house settle around us. And for reasons I didn't understand yet, I couldn't stop thinking about Peter. The way he looked at me, the way he didn't. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the low rumble of voices downstairs. Caleb was still passed out, half buried under his blanket with one leg dangling off the bed. I slid out quietly and made my way down the stairs. Peter was in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing gray joggers and a black hoodie with the sleeves pushed up. He looked way too good for someone making eggs. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Hey," I replied, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. He nodded toward the French press. "Coffee's fresh. Mugs are in the cabinet to your left." I poured myself a cup, the warmth immediately grounding me. I leaned against the counter, watching him move around the kitchen like he'd been doing this routine for years. No wasted motions. Calm, steady. "You cook every morning?" I asked, just to fill the silence. "When I'm here," he said, "I like routines." I took a sip. "Caleb definitely doesn't." That made him smirk. "No, he doesn't. Never did." There was something about the way he said that. Soft, but knowing, that made my stomach twist. We ate on the deck again, just the two of us. Peter didn't talk much, but he didn't need to. There was something oddly comfortable about just sitting near him, listening to the birds and the occasional creak of the wood beneath our chairs. I found myself stealing glances at him more than I should have, at the way his forearms flexed when he brought the mug to his lips, the curve of his jaw when he tilted his head toward the sun. He caught me once, mid-glance. Our eyes met, and for a second, I thought I saw something flicker in his expression, something sharp, maybe even curious. But it passed too fast to name. Caleb eventually joined us, hair messy and eyes half closed. "You two bonding without me?" he mumbled, flopping into a chair. "Just trying not to wake you up," I said. Yeah, he muttered, already sipping coffee like his life depended on it. The rest of the day passed in slow waves. We hiked a nearby trail, grilled burgers, played a few board games that devolved into shouting matches. I couldn't stop noticing how different Peter and Caleb were. Caleb was loud, sarcastic, all nervous energy. Peter was calm, thoughtful, always measuring his words like he didn't want to waste them. Later that evening, Caleb disappeared into his room to FaceTime some guy he'd been flirting with for weeks. I didn't know the details, just that Caleb had this habit of catching feelings for people who lived too far away. Or maybe that was the point. I ended up back in the living room. Peter was sitting on the couch again, this time with the TV on low volume. Some old Western movie. He didn't even look up when I came in. Just nodded slightly, like he'd been expecting me. I hovered awkwardly for a second. "You can sit," he said without turning. I did. We watched in silence, the glow of the screen flickering across the room. I tried not to fidget, tried not to think about how close we were on the couch. I could feel the heat of his arm just inches from mine. "You and Caleb," he said suddenly. "You've been friends a while?" "Since junior year of high school," I said. "We met in Spanish class. Neither of us could roll our R's." He chuckled, that quiet little laugh that somehow made me feel warmer. "You've ever liked him?" I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" He finally looked at me. His eyes weren't accusing, just curious. "Sorry," he said. "That was too direct." "No, I cleared my throat. "He's like a brother to me." Peter nodded slowly. "Good. He's a mess with relationships." I laughed softly. "Yeah, he is." Peter sipped his whiskey and turned back to the TV. The silence stretched again, heavier this time. My heart thudded in my chest, too loud in the quiet room. I didn't know what to say, or if I should say anything at all. Then Peter spoke again, his voice lower. "You remind me of someone I used to know." I looked over. "Yeah?" He nodded, eyes still fixed on the screen. Quiet, observant, always thinking. Was that a good thing? Peter paused. It was, until it wasn't. I didn't ask what he meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Eventually, the movie ended. The credits rolled over soft instrumental music, and Peter stood. "Well," he said, stretching, "I'm turning in." I nodded, trying not to look disappointed. "Night." But before he disappeared down the hall, he He stopped and glanced back at me. "You can stay up as late as you want," he said. "Just don't overthink everything." And then he was gone. I sat there for a long time after the screen went dark, the room silent except for the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. "Don't overthink everything," he'd said. Too late. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the way Peter looked at me when he asked if I'd ever liked Caleb. It wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't neutral either. There was something in his eyes, measuring, searching, maybe even daring me to say something else. I wanted to brush it off, tell myself I was reading into things. But the longer I stared at the ceiling of that wooden loft, listening to Caleb snore softly in the bed beside me, the more I realized I couldn't. Something was happening, or had already started happening. I just didn't know what. The next day was colder. Clouds had rolled in overnight, and a damp chill settled over the cabin. Caleb was glued to his phone all morning, texting the mystery guy he'd FaceTimed the night before. I asked him if he wanted to go on a hike like we'd planned, but he just shrugged. "You can go without me," he mumbled. "I might just stay in today." I tried not to be annoyed, but I was. I needed to get out of the house, if only to quiet the restless swirl in my head. I threw on a hoodie and boots and headed out toward the trail behind the cabin. The path twisted through thick pine woods, damp with recent rain, the scent of wet earth filling the air. I made it maybe 10 minutes down the trail when I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw Peter approaching, hands in his jacket pockets, moving with that same easy stride, like he belonged in the woods. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said, slowing as he caught up. "All good," I said. "Figured you were still inside." He shrugged. "Saw you heading out. Thought you might want company." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded, and we walked in silence for a while. The trail curved past a small stream, the water moving quickly over smooth stones. Birds called in the distance, and our boots crunched softly over damp leaves. "You like being out here?" Peter asked after a while. "Yeah," I said. "It's peaceful." He nodded. "That's why I moved here." I glanced over. "You ever miss the city?" He was quiet for a second. "Sometimes, but peace wins out." There was a pause. Then he added, "When you get older, noise doesn't feel the same, even the good kind." I didn't quite understand what he meant, but I let it sit between us. Eventually, we reached a small clearing, the trees parting just enough to reveal a view of the valley below. The clouds had thinned slightly, and patches of light streaked across the trees like fingers reaching down from the sky. We stopped, both of us quiet. Peter took a deep breath. "I used to come up here alone after the divorce." I glanced at him, but he wasn't looking at me, just staring out over the trees. I didn't know what to do with myself. Had the house, the quiet, but it wasn't enough. Not at first. I shifted slightly, unsure if he wanted me to respond. "My ex said I was emotionally distant," he continued. "She wasn't wrong. I think I spent years trying not to feel too much." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. He finally turned to me, his expression calm but unreadable. "You ever do that?" "Do what?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Hold back. Push things down. Pretend you're fine when you're not." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, all the time." Our eyes met, and I felt that same quiet electricity from the other night, humming between us. He didn't say anything, just nodded once, like he understood something about me that I hadn't even said out loud. We stayed out there a little longer, then started the walk back. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. If anything, it felt intimate, like we'd said more in what we didn't say than in the actual words. That evening, Caleb decided he wanted to stream a movie in the loft, so I gave him the space and went downstairs. Peter was back on the couch, same spot, another book in hand. No whiskey this time, just water. He looked up when I entered. "Avoiding the teen drama?" "Yeah," I said, sliding into the armchair across from him. "He's watching some dystopian thing. Everyone's brooding." Peter smirked. "Sounds familiar." I arched an eyebrow. "Are you saying I brood?" He gave me a look. "You have a reflective vibe." That sounds like a polite way of saying I'm quiet and weird, Peter chuckled. Quiet's not a bad thing. Means you notice things other people miss. I felt my face flush and looked down at my hands. He leaned back, stretching his legs. You planning on going back home after this? Yeah. I have a summer class starting in a few weeks. He nodded. What then? I shrugged. Graduate next year. After that. No clue. He watched me carefully, then said, You don't give yourself enough credit. My eyes lifted to meet his. You barely know me. He held my gaze. I know enough. For a second, neither of us moved. The tension in the room tightened, subtle but undeniable. Then Peter stood, slow and deliberate. I'm gonna head to bed, he said. Long day. Yeah, I said, my voice soft. Same. He lingered for a second, like he was about to say something else. But he didn't. He just gave me a nod and disappeared down the hallway, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and a silence that suddenly felt anything but peaceful. The next few days blurred into each other, all pine trees and soft rain and late mornings. Caleb and I still hung out, played board games, made pancakes, watched dumb comedies on his laptop, but it was different. Or maybe I was different. I kept noticing how often Peter crossed my mind when he wasn't even in the room. I'd catch myself looking for him, listening for the creak of the stairs or the sound of his voice in the kitchen. It wasn't just that he was attractive. That part was obvious. It was the way he made me feel, seen maybe, grounded, and slightly unsteady all at once. One afternoon, Caleb decided to drive into the nearby town, to meet up with a guy from some dating app. He asked if I wanted to tag along, but I could tell he didn't actually want me to come. So I waved him off and told him I'd hold down the fort. As his car pulled out of the gravel driveway, I felt that strange quiet settle over the cabin again. I made tea, wandered around the porch a bit, then eventually ended up in the den where Peter was working on something. He had a notebook open, glasses on, pen in hand. The fire was going in the corner, low and warm. You're good at disappearing, I said from the doorway. Peter looked up and smiled faintly. That's the goal. I stepped inside and lowered myself into the chair opposite him. Working? Trying, he said. I write a little, just essays, nothing important. I didn't know why that surprised me. There was something about Peter that felt more physical, like he'd be the type to build things with his hands, not sit and write in silence. You ever share them? I asked. Not really. It's more for me, I nodded, understanding that more than I could explain. He looked at me for a moment. You seem restless, I shrugged. Hard to sit still lately. Peter leaned back slightly, setting his pen down. You want to go for a walk? I didn't hesitate. Yeah, I'd like that. We took a trail I hadn't seen before, one that curved deeper into the woods behind the cabin. It was narrower, more overgrown, the kind of path that felt half forgotten. The trees leaned closer here, and the air smelled of moss and something else, sharp and clean. Caleb doesn't know this trail exists, Peter said as we stepped over a fallen branch. Used to be my escape when things got loud. I glanced over. You mean when the divorce happened? He nodded once. And before that. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. We walked in silence for a while, side by side, the occasional brush of his arm against mine, setting off tiny sparks in my stomach. Eventually, the path opened up to a small clearing with a flat rock formation overlooking a shallow stream. Peter sat down on the edge and patted the space next to him. I joined him, the cool stones seeping through my jeans. The sound of the stream was rhythmic, like breathing. You're not what I expected, Peter said suddenly. I turned to him. What did you expect? He thought for a second. I don't know. Someone louder. Someone more like Caleb. I smiled. Sorry to disappoint. You don't. I looked away, unsure what to do with that. My heart beat faster, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks even with the cool air. I was worried about having someone else in the house, he continued, voice softer now. I don't do well with strangers. I glanced at him. Am I still a stranger? Peter didn't answer immediately. Then, no. That word hung in the air, delicate and dangerous. I looked at him again. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, they were focused, like he was studying something behind mine. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Then he looked away, exhaled, and stood. We should head back before it gets dark. And just like that, the moment broke. We walked back slower this time, less talking, more thinking. I kept wondering what would have happened if I'd said something, if I'd asked the question hovering in my chest. Back at the cabin, Caleb still wasn't back. The sky was turning gold at the edges, the porch lights flickering on with the sensor. "I'm gonna shower," Peter said, stepping out of his boots. "Cool," I replied, like my brain hadn't just been hijacked by the image of him under running water. I retreated to the loft, trying to distract myself by scrolling my phone. But it didn't work. The house was too quiet. My thoughts were too loud. A while later, I came downstairs for water, barefoot, hoodie on, trying not to think too hard. The hallway light was on, casting a soft glow toward the back of the house. Peter came out of the bathroom then, towel slung low on his hips, hair wet, shirtless. We both stopped. His eyes met mine. For a second, neither of us moved. I felt heat crawl up my neck, down my chest, like my body was reacting before my brain could catch up. He gave a small, almost amused smile. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said, calm and casual. But something in his tone wasn't casual at all. "You didn't." I lied. His gaze lingered a beat too long. Then he nodded once and walked past me, the scent of soap and something woodsy trailing behind him. I stood there in the hallway, alone again, heart beat loud in my ears. Something was shifting, and I wasn't sure I could stop it anymore. Caleb didn't come back until after midnight. I knew because I was still awake, lying on my side in the loft, staring at the dark ceiling while my thoughts ran in tight circles. I heard the front door open quietly, his muffled footsteps, the low hum of his voice as he said something to Peter downstairs. I couldn't make out the words, just the cadence. I stayed where I was, pretending to sleep when Caleb finally climbed the stairs. He smelled like cold air and cheap cologne. "You awake?" he whispered. "Barely," I muttered. He flopped into his bed with a dramatic sigh. "Dude, I'm exhausted." "Good date?" I asked, more out of habit than curiosity. He groaned. "Define good." That made me smile despite myself. "So, no second date?" Maybe." He rolled onto his side, already half gone. "Night, man. Night." His breathing evened out within minutes. Mine didn't. The next morning was awkward, in a way I couldn't explain. Not outwardly. Nothing obvious had changed. Caleb was his usual self, complaining about coffee being too weak and stealing half my toast. Peter was calm, collected, like always. But every time my eyes drifted toward him, something tightened in my chest. We kept missing each other's gaze. Or maybe we weren't missing it at all. After breakfast, Caleb announced he was heading back into town again. "Same guy," he added, like he was daring me to judge him. "You do you," I said. Peter raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Once the car disappeared down the road, the cabin felt different. Not quieter. Heavier. Like the air itself was waiting. I busied myself cleaning up the kitchen, mostly to give my hands something to do. Peter stepped in beside me, reaching past me for a towel, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body without touching him. "Thanks for helping out," he said. "Sure." Our shoulders brushed. It was barely anything. An accident, really. But neither of us moved away. I could feel his breath shift, just slightly. I didn't look at him, but I knew. He was looking at me. "Hey," he said quietly. I turned. For a moment, he just studied my face, like he was weighing something. Deciding. "You okay?" he asked. I swallowed. "Yeah, just thinking." He nodded slowly. "You do that a lot." "So do you." That earned a faint smile. He stepped back first, clearing his throat. "I'm going to check the firewood. Storm's coming tonight." "I can help." He hesitated. "You don't have to." "I want to." Outside, the sky was already shifting. Low clouds rolling in, the air sharp with the promise of rain. We stacked logs in silence for a while, the repetitive motion almost meditative. "You ever feel like you're standing at the edge of something?" Peter said suddenly, not looking at me. "Like what?" "Like if you take one more step, things won't be the same." My hands stilled. "Yeah," I said, "I do." He finally turned toward me. His expression was serious now, unguarded in a way I hadn't seen yet. "This is complicated," he said. I nodded. "I know. You're my son's best friend." "I know that too. And I don't want to hurt him." "Neither do I." The wind picked up, rattling the trees around us. The first drop of rain hit my cheek, cold and sudden. Peter exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I should probably stop this before it becomes something else." I looked at him. Really looked at him. "And do you want to?" The question hung between us, fragile and dangerous. Peter didn't answer right away. His eyes searched mine like he was looking for permission, or maybe forgiveness. "No," he said finally. "I don't." My heart hammered. The rain came down harder now, a steady curtain around us. Peter took a step closer, slow, deliberate, giving me time to move away. I didn't. He stopped just in front of me, close enough that I could smell the clean, familiar scent of him. His voice dropped. "This stays between us," he said, "at least for now." I nodded. "Okay." His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently brushed my knuckles. A question, not a demand. I answered by letting my fingers curl slightly around his. It wasn't dramatic. No rush, no fireworks, just a quiet acknowledgement that something had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Thunder rolled overhead. Peter released my hand first, like he was afraid of holding on too long. "Go inside," he said softly. "You're going to get soaked." I turned and headed for the porch, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away. At the door, I glanced back. Peter was still standing there in the rain, watching me. And for the first time since I'd arrived at that cabin, I wasn't confused about what I felt. I was just terrified of what came next. The rain kept falling all night. It didn't come down in sheets or anything dramatic. Just a steady rhythm against the cabin's roof, a constant white noise that filled every room. Caleb didn't come back that evening. He'd texted around 5 to say he was staying overnight in town. No explanation, just, "Don't wait up, tell Dad I'm good." I stared at that message for way too long before showing it to Peter, who just nodded like it didn't surprise him. By 9 o'clock, the house felt swallowed by the storm. I sat in the loft for a while, pretending to read, but my eyes kept drifting to the rain-soaked windows and the vague golden glow coming from downstairs. Peter was still up. I could hear the soft clink of glass and the low hum of music coming from the speakers. Some old jazz record, slow and heavy with trumpet. I don't know what I was waiting for. Permission, maybe. Or an excuse. But eventually I stood, pulled on a hoodie, and made my way downstairs. He was on the couch, again. Same seat. Glass of something amber in his hand, the room lit by only a few lamps. His eyes flicked to me as I stepped in, but he didn't speak. Just gestured slightly toward the empty cushion beside him. I sat. For a long moment, the only sound was the storm and the scratchy trumpet on the record. "You drink?" he asked after a while. "Sometimes." He passed me his glass without comment. I sipped. Strong. Smoky. Warm. It hit my throat like heat, but didn't burn. Peter let the silence stretch again. This time, it felt like something was building underneath it, an unspoken current winding tighter by the second. "I thought about today," he said finally. I looked at him. "Me too." He nodded, like he expected that. Then leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "This isn't a game to me," he said, voice low, "and it can't be some passing moment we just forget next week." "I'm not trying to play," I said quietly. He looked over. "Then what are you doing?" I exhaled slowly, searching for the words. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel random or meaningless." That answer must have landed somewhere in him because he didn't look away, didn't move. He just stared at me, long, searching, unblinking. Then, slowly, he reached over and took the glass back from my hand. Set it down on the table. His fingers brushed mine. We both paused. He didn't ask this time. He just leaned in, slow and deliberate, like he was giving me every second to back away. I didn't. My breath caught in my throat as his face came closer. I could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of rain and whiskey and something like cedar, and then his lips were on mine, soft, slow. It wasn't rushed. There was no hunger in it, at least not yet, just intention. Like he needed to feel if the world would stop spinning when we touched. It did. When he pulled back, I opened my eyes. He hadn't moved far, just enough to look at me again, to search my face for regret. There wasn't any. He reached up, brushed a thumb across my cheek. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, are you?" He smiled faintly. "I think so." We sat like that for a while, not kissing again, not talking, just being. Our legs touched lightly. My pulse was still racing, but not from fear, just from the sheer weight of what had just happened. Eventually, Peter stood and held out a hand. I blinked. "Where are we going?" "I'm not doing this on the couch," he said, eyes unreadable but voice steady. "Not like this." I hesitated for a beat, then took his hand. He led me quietly through the dark hallway to his bedroom. The room smelled like clean laundry and something masculine I couldn't place, something that made my head feel fuzzier the longer I stood in it. He didn't turn the overhead lights on, just the lamp on the nightstand. Then he turned to face me. There was no rush, no pressure. He stepped close, cupped the side of my face again, and kissed me a second time. This one deeper, a little more sure of itself. His hands stayed at my jaw and neck, not wandering, like he needed to prove something before anything else could happen. When we finally parted, we stood there for a long second, breathing the same air. "You sure?" he asked one last time. I didn't speak. I kissed him back. I woke up before him. For a few minutes I just laid there, half covered by the blanket, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of Peter's breathing beside me. The room was quiet, not just in the absence of noise way, but in the way something feels still after a shift, like the air itself was holding its breath. He was on his side, facing me, one hand resting loosely near his chest, his bare shoulders just barely brushing mine. His face, usually so composed, looked softer in sleep. Peaceful, younger, and maybe that's when the reality started to hit me. This wasn't just a kiss. This wasn't just closeness. This was a line we had crossed. Together. And no matter how gentle or honest it had felt, it still existed in the shadow of something bigger. Caleb. The friend who had unknowingly brought me here. Who'd trusted both of us. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself and quietly slid out of bed. The house was still dim, the sky outside a soft gray through the large window by the kitchen. I moved around on autopilot, started the kettle, opened the blinds halfway, tried not to think too loudly. My body felt warm in that lingering way, like it hadn't decided whether to relax or panic. I stood by the counter and watched the rain cling to the windows. "You're up early." I turned. Peter had thrown on sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair still messy from sleep. His voice was lower than usual, raspy. "I couldn't sleep," I said. He nodded, stepping into the kitchen. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. He stopped a few feet away, watching me. I keep thinking about him, I admitted. Caleb? Yeah, Peter exhaled, then leaned against the counter across from me. Me too. We let the silence stretch again. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't simple either. I don't regret it, I said finally, quietly. His eyes softened. Neither do I. But it's complicated, Peter nodded. That's the part I've been turning over all night. There was a moment where I wanted to say more. Ask what this meant. Ask what we were. But the words stayed stuck in my chest. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear the answer. Peter stepped closer and reached out, resting his hand gently on my waist. You don't have to figure it out right now, he said. I looked up at him. His eyes were steady, not rushed, not asking for anything, just there. I don't want this to be something we pretend didn't happen, I said. It won't be. I believed him. That morning passed slowly. We stayed close, not in any dramatic or overly romantic way, but with small gestures, shoulders brushing in the kitchen, fingers grazing when we reached for the same plate, a shared look that lingered too long. It was like we were still discovering what this space between us meant, but when Caleb's car pulled into the driveway around noon, everything changed. I heard it before I saw it. His tires crunching the gravel, the familiar squeal of his brakes. My stomach dropped. Peter met my eyes. And just like that, the warmth of the morning snapped into a quiet tension, like the world had finally remembered we weren't alone. You should go up, Peter said softly. I nodded. I slipped upstairs, heart racing, and sat on the edge of my bed. My palms were sweating. I could hear Caleb come inside, hear him laugh and say something about the weather. I couldn't make out Peter's response. Their voices faded into the rest of the house. Eventually, Caleb shouted up the stairs. You alive up there? I cleared my throat. Yeah. Come down. I brought donuts. I forced my voice to sound casual. Be right there. I stood in front of the mirror for a second, adjusting my shirt, brushing a hand through my hair. Nothing about my face looked different, but I felt different. Like my body didn't quite belong to me anymore. Or maybe, like I was more aware of it than I'd ever been. I made my way downstairs. Caleb grinned at me from the kitchen, box of donuts open, sunglasses still pushed up on his head. Dude, I got you that stupid maple one you like. Thanks, I said, my voice barely steady. Peter was by the sink, drinking coffee like nothing had happened. His expression was unreadable, but calm, like always. And maybe that was the part that scared me the most. I don't know how I got through that afternoon. Caleb talked a mile a minute, like he was trying to make up for the time he'd been gone. He told us about the guy, some barista named Troy, and how they stayed up talking until 4 a.m. He even joked about sleeping on a couch that was clearly designed by Satan himself. I laughed at the right parts. I ate my donut. I nodded like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Peter moved around the house like nothing had changed, but every glance, every brush of his hand against mine in the kitchen felt loaded, charged. Like we were pretending for Caleb's sake, and maybe for our own too. At one point, while Caleb was in the shower, Peter stepped into the living room where I was pretending to scroll through my phone. He said nothing at first, just stood there. Then, quietly, "You doing okay?" I didn't look at him. "I don't know." He nodded once. "That's fair." I wanted to reach out, touch his hand, say something, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not like that. "I don't want to lie to him," I said finally. Peter exhaled. "Neither do I. But I don't want to lose him either." He didn't answer. That night, after dinner, Caleb went out to the back deck with a beer and his phone, earbuds in, music loud enough I could hear the bass from inside. He was singing under his breath, off-key, in that carefree way only Caleb could get away with. Peter and I were left alone again in the kitchen, quietly washing dishes together like we'd done it 100 times before. When the last plate was dry, I turned to him. "We should talk, after." He nodded, drying his hands slowly. "My room?" I nodded back. "Later." When the house went quiet and Caleb was finally asleep, or at least pretending to be, I knocked once on Peter's door. He opened it without a word. Inside, everything was dim and still. He didn't reach for me this time, didn't kiss me. We just sat down on the edge of the bed, a safe distance apart. "I've never done this before," I said. "What?" "Fallen for someone I wasn't supposed to." Peter's jaw tensed slightly. "Same." We sat in silence. "I care about him," I said. "But I care about you too." He looked down at his hands. "This isn't about choosing between us, isn't it?" Peter looked at me then, really looked. "I don't know where this goes," he said quietly. "Maybe nowhere. Maybe somewhere complicated. But I know how I feel when I'm near you, and I don't want to ignore that just because it's messy." I swallowed hard. "Do you want to keep this going?" I asked. Peter didn't hesitate. Yes. It was simple, and heavy, and terrifying. "I don't want to sneak around," I said. "If this is real, we have to tell him. Not now, but soon." Peter nodded. Agreed. We didn't sleep together that night, not in the way we had before. Instead, we laid side by side, fully clothed, just listening to the storm finally fade outside the window. His fingers brushed mine under the blanket. A quiet kind of promise. The next morning, I left the room before Caleb woke up. We made breakfast like nothing had changed. And maybe, for that brief morning, it hadn't. But something had shifted. That final day came quicker than I expected. Bags packed. Hugs exchanged. Caleb insisted we stop at that donut place on the drive home. Peter helped me load my suitcase into the trunk, his hand lingering just a little too long on mine. "You'll keep in touch?" he asked. "I will." We didn't say goodbye the way we wanted to. Not with Caleb standing 5 feet away, yelling something about the aux cord. But as I slid into the passenger seat, I looked back. Peter was still standing at the edge of the driveway, watching me go. And in that quiet moment, I knew. This wasn't over, not even close.